Hi. So in my starter pack, I said I would give you a few videos just to help you putting the vat together and then tying your shibori pieces and putting them into the indigo. So we have here the ingredients which I've listed on your kit sheet, and I'm just going to quickly demonstrate how you can put this indigo vat together. It's a really simple process. I used to think that any indigo vat was very difficult to make, but actually it's really not. The hydrosulfate is the stupid people's vat, the people that really don't understand chemistry, the people who have the fear of making the vat. It's really the cannot be missed vat, and we're going to put it on today. And I'm hoping that at home you're going to have a quick look at this video and you're going to take the courage of setting up your own vat really quickly, because it is really a simple process. You can't miss it. So take off your jewelry, because if like me you have great big bulky jewelry, you tend to get your hands a little bit blue. There's no need to wear gloves to do the setting up of the vat. You will need to wear some good gloves when you start dyeing, because you will get your hands into terrible trouble. I have the large container. I tend to recycle paint containers because they come with a really good lid that closes quite well. Once I'm done, I just put on this lid. It's nice and tight, no accident possible, but also it will keep the oxygen out of the vat, and that's very good. And if I need to store my vat for a very long time, I can just tuck it into a corner. There's no risk of kicking it and making a mess, and there is no risk of it going flat for getting too much oxygen. So those are like gold mine. You don't have to have a painter's container. If you are used to feed the birds, go to your garden center and get one of these big boxes full of like little bowls of grain for your birds, and you will find the lids will be nice and tight on top of them. Now, what have I got here? I have the big container. It's almost 10 liters and it's full of clear water. It's slightly lukewarm water. Like I said on the instruction sheet, it's about 40 degrees. So I have this little thermometer, which is quite handy. Okay, let's switch it on. As you can see in my studio, it's not very warm just now, 18 degrees, but inside the vat, it is about 40. I just pour this water straight out of the tap, so it's been out for a little while, and it's about 39 degrees, which is a good temperature for setting up the vat. Don't go over 50, that will really kill the indigo, but anything between 40 and 50 will speed up the process. If you cannot access hot water, no problem at all. Do it with cold water. It will just take a little bit longer to kick in, but it will be absolutely fine. I have 3 jars. I said on the instruction sheet, glass jars. If that's all you have, recycle your jam jars, pickle jars, etc. But I tend to have in my studio lots of these plastic jars. They're really quite practical. They usually clean very well, like this one, but obviously the indigo one tends to stay blue, so always maybe use the specific one for the indigo, and then you don't have any problem. So I tend to label my jars before I start. Obviously you can see the difference between the indigo and the spectralite. One is white and one is blue, but when it comes to seeing the difference between the soda ash and the spectralite, is two white powder, round about the same quantity, in the same kind of jar. It's really easy to make a mistake. So take a second and label your jars, even if it's with sellotape. I find even after all this time, I tend to, from time to time, make a mistake. So we're going to do this in 3 steps. We're going to first humidify the indigo, and with pre-reduced indigo, which is basically, when you look at it, it's a little bit like instant coffee. It's freeze-dried. It is natural indigo. It's already been reduced. It's then been freeze-dried, and we're now going to mix it with some water and reactivate it. The second step will be to use the soda ash. The soda ash is what is going to allow the indigo to stick to your cloth. We're going to humidify that and dissolve it with hot water. Actually, we're going to use water from the kettle to make it really, really hot, because this will help dissolving it. Sometimes the soda ash takes a little bit of energy. Just keep going, keep singing in your head while it's happening. Once we have both of these liquidified, we will tip the soda ash into the indigo, mix it together, and we will then lower the container into the water. I will show you what I mean by that. I never tip over from a high distance between my jar and the water, just to avoid entering a lot of oxygen in the mix. Once we're done, then we're going to give it a good stir. And then the final step is to take some of the spectralite, which is in this jar as a powder matter. We're not going to mix that with anything. We're just going to sprinkle it on the top. And then we're going to stir again. And the reducing process will happen quite quickly. Little bubbles will appear at the top of the water. That will be the flour, what initiated people call the flour. It seems something very magical, but it's just the reduction process in the making. And once I feel we have enough flour, we're going to close the lid, say goodbye for now, and within an hour, about an hour, the indigo will be ready. Now, I'm not going to come back online in an hour. I'm just going to simply add some photos onto your little sheet, okay? I hope you are ready to see this. So I'm now grabbing the jar of indigo powder. I have 20 grams, and this is very suitable for a vat of about 10 liters. And in this, I'm going to mix some lukewarm water. That water comes from the same tap as this one, and it's about the same kind of temperature. Now, if you are working with natural indigo in a powder form, you will need to take a lot more care to humidify your indigo. And sometimes when you read a very complicated process like put your powder into a jar, add some glass beads, shake it up, humidify it, that is for powder indigo, not for pre-reduce. Pre-reduce does not need that. The process has just happened suddenly. So here we are. I am now gently mixing this indigo, and I can feel with the bottom of my spoon onto the bottom of the jar, I can actually feel if there are more grains left or not. And it's a really, really quick process. Now, I don't know if you can see in the video, but we already have an iridescent film happening at the top. So this is basically like making a blue cup of instant coffee. Very, very interesting process altogether. I can see from where I am a very beautiful iridescent film, opalescent almost. It's a little bit like when you go to get petrol for your car, fuel for your car. If it's a rainy day and you drop some fuel on the ground, you get this film of iridescence. It's the same kind of color, okay? So now I'm not really spending any time on this. And I'm going to scoop the bottom just to see. I have a couple of little bits which are still there. And as long as I have some, I will keep on stirring. But it doesn't actually really matter in what direction. Now I can see already some bubbles being created here. Okay, and I think that will be me. So the second process is now to mix the soda ash. And for the soda ash, I'm actually going to add only a little bit of water. It's also in a powder form, but I'm going to mix some almost boiling water, and only a little bit, because the more I mix, and the harder it is. And of course, I forgot a spoon, so give me a second. Fortunately, I always have some instruments on my desk. So here we go. I'm now going to mix. Now, what the soda ash tends to do is to congregate into big lumps. So it's actually better if you do not have too much water in this. It's a bit like when you make pancakes and all the flour gathers up at the bottom of your bowl. and it's very hard to break it. Well, it's the same with soda ash. Okay, it's quite crunchy, a little bit like sand, so you can hear it when you're mixing it. But actually, if you're using very hot water, I've actually got it almost all mixed up. Okay. Now always use the bottom of your spoon to check that there are no lumps left, because if there are lumps left, once they are in the vat, it's very difficult to mix. But actually, I'm looking at this container and okay, it's not clear water because there is some substance in it, but you can't actually see any lumps, any powder, nothing at all. It's completely dissolved. So if you can, remember, grab some water which you have just boiled in a kettle, and it makes a big difference. Now I am going to add this now to my jar of indigo, which is here, and I hope I've got enough space. There we go. It's going to be quite close. And I'm going to mix this together. Now what this does, the soda ash, what it does, it's actually going to help your indigo to stick to your fabric. Because if you read my instructions, you know now that indigo, when it's in its soluble form, does not have the ability to stick itself to the cloth. And when it does stick itself to the cloth, it's not blue. So what we are about to make now is what's called white indigo. So white indigo will actually be the right indigo to dip your fabric into, but look at that tiny little drop, and that's my jar totally full. Okay, so you can see I've got this really lovely film at the top. Now what I need to do is incorporate this mix into the 10 liters I've got here. Now most people just tip it over, but I won't do that. What I'm going to do is lower this jar into the water. Here we go. And tip it over just to empty it. So that's now this almost empty, but not quite. So what I have done is reserve a little bit of water here, which I'm going to add to this. And that helps me clearing. We don't really want to waste any of this indigo. So same again, I'm going to lower my jar into the water, and there is still a little bit more, so I'm going to, same process again, fill up the jar and mix the leftover of indigo, and finally tip the rest into this, and that's it. So I now have pretty much 10 liters into my container, and I have all the indigo in it. So I'm going to fill up the rest, because at this stage, because it's not been reduced, it doesn't actually really matter how much more water you add. And using my kettle, I will add a little bit more, so to have a very nice big full vat. Here we go. And now I'm going to stir just to make sure that the powder and the soda ash are well distributed in the whole vat. Can you see how the color of the water has changed? We now have this like opalescent top, which is really interesting. If I break the movement, then I end up with a little bit of flour at the top. Can you see? So this is what we call the flour. It's a set of bubbles, and it's the indigo which is already reduced. And now, at this stage, is the right time to add the spectralite. Now the spectralite, it is what makes the reduction, what transforms this indigo into white indigo. And by doing that, you will end up with an indigo that you can attach to your cloth. So I have tipped over the powder, sprinkled it, and I'm now going to distribute it evenly by stirring in a circular movement. I'm trying to cause a little vortex in the middle. I don't know if you can see. So if you stir with a regular movement, then gradually you end up with, here we go, this little vortex. It's a little bit like a storm in the making. And then you stop and create a counter movement, and that creates the flower. Okay, so here we go. A couple of times more, and we can just assume, now this is very nice and very smooth. We can just assume that this is very well dissolved. And we now have quite a good flower coming out. Okay, here we go. And that will probably be enough. Okay, so now I tend to keep all the blue stuff together. I have a little spoon here, and I'm going to lower it, and at this stage we have blue water. And the reason we have blue water is because we have dissolved blue powder into water. But hopefully the spectralite is going to reduce this, this mix into proper indigo, and the color will change from blue to kind of like greeny yellow. That will be the indigo reduced and ready to be used. And at a later stage, I will dip some pieces so you can see what happens when you're actually indigo dyeing. Okay, so this is us. Now the only thing we need to do is put the top on. Beautiful color. Et voilà.